On May 23rd, I woke up early in the morning, saw a bunch of people outside in my yard walking around with suits on, and they looked like hazmat groups. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I came outside, they're walking all over my property, they're back in my property back there, which was illegal, taking chickens away from my neighbor that has never done anything illegal that they say he did. Well, I just couldn't get over how anybody can just come in and destroy a person's life over something like a chicken. I mean, he was better to his chickens than most people are to their spouses. And I just couldn't understand what was happening. They parked big trucks out by the road. They were in front of our mailboxes. We didn't get our mail delivered that day. We had to wait for them to come a day or so later to bring our mail because they couldn't get to our mailboxes. So this whole thing was just crazy, and they couldn't even tell anybody what was going on, which I thought was crazy. Wouldn't let Tommy out of his house. Just, I don't understand it. I will not ever give anything to those people, ever. So I'm very distraught over what they did with the chickens, and we miss them back there. We'd like them back. Of course, half of them I think they killed because they killed the babies and the eggs and everything else, and that was, if you ask me, that's worse than anything that they were saying happened here. How can they do such a thing and get away with it?
Hello, my name is Thomas Carano, and this is my wife Gina Carano, and we're up here on my farm in Rochester, New York, T&T Game Fowl Farm, and we are doing a interview on what had happened to our farm back in May, and just sharing a little bit about the history of the farm and the conditions of the birds after they were confiscated at the facilities they're now being held at.
Okay. As you can see behind us, we have a lot of pens here and over on the other side as well, and behind where that fence is, and they are empty. It is very sad to live on a farm and not be able to take care of the birds. They left our property in pristine health, and unfortunately that is not the case at this time.
So how long have you had game fowl?
I got into chickens when I was about 6-7 years old. I grew up down in Long Island, New York, and my family, we raised hogs, and I had started to get into the game chickens, well, regular chickens, and then into the game chickens, I'd say about 8-9 years old. And it's been something I've done my whole life. I've probably raised them now for close to 37 years, on and off.
Okay. How long have you had this farm?
Gina and I bought this farm back in 2008, and when we bought the farm, we made sure that it was agriculturally zoned. We do have neighbors all around us, and we had to make sure that everything was in the proper zoning and that we can raise some roosters. And we've had it 9 years now.
Yeah, we like in the springtime to hatch babies, sometimes incubated, sometimes hen hatched, and our neighbors come and the children come and just enjoy them and learn how to feed them and really have some good times. And unfortunately, that was taken away from us.
What kind of chickens do you raise?
I raise primarily 3 families of game fowl. I raise a family of hatch chickens that I got from a very dear friend of mine in the Midwest that's had them since 1962. The man that he had got them from, Mr. Blackwell, had gotten them in 1948. And then I raise a family of sweater gray chickens that I got back in 2005. the breeder that I got them from down in Georgia had them since before I was born, I guess 1971, 1970. And the breeder before him had them probably from the 30s, 40s. And then we have a family of white hackles that on paper have been up here since the early 1900s.
There's a lot of history to these type of birds, and they are probably the most misunderstood animal on the planet today.
What got you interested in game fowl?
Well, when I was a kid, I come from a rather large family. I come from a family of 8. And growing up on the farm when we were kids, we didn't do a lot of playing in the house and with toys and things like that. And, when I'd get out to my father's on the weekends, he raised hogs and sheep, and people used to have their game chickens running out on the farms back then. And I really always was interested, just always enjoyed just the nobleness of the game chicken, high-spirited and just, beautiful colors. And as a kid, it was just always a lot of fun chasing them around. And as I started getting older, I started learning the value of preservation and keeping these old families of chickens going. Back in, I guess it was 2009, 2010, I had gotten the American game fowl listed under protection with the North Carolina Livestock Conservancy. Because there's been so much misunderstanding with the birds, the population has been becoming scarce, and I just started seeing that there was a real need for some things to change as far as protection of the different families of these old birds.
When you were able to visit your birds at the facilities that they're being held at, what was their condition?
Well, this is the unfortunate part, really unfortunate part. The condition of the birds when Mr. Seville and I went to inspect them was pretty much deplorable. Out of 70 hens, I could recognize a dozen. I had 2 hens that were 15 years old. Each one was 15 years old. And I lost one of them. It was a toppy hen that we couldn't find her. And the other one was just barely hanging on to life there.
Some had already died.
Yeah, several had died already. They couldn't account for them. And then we even had a meat bird that doesn't even show up. So we had 30 roosters and stags together, and several of them had slip bills and slip spurs, and just not in the best of health. The feathering was not good. One thing that's not understood in the general public is that there is a lot of work that goes into raising these particular type of chickens. They're not your average chicken. They're very athletic chickens. One of the things I used to do is I would have them out on this green grass where I'd have my pens, and I'd just keep them exercised and just always moving. And even the feed, different times, different seasons, the chickens require different proteins and minerals and things to always keep them in optimal health.
How much work goes into a small hobby farm like this?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's every day, 365 days a year, and when I am out of town, my wife picks up the slack with feeding, with watering, with rescuing birds that get into trouble out here.
I'd say 2 to 3 times a day. You're out here making sure they're getting exercise, making sure they're safe, making sure they're well fed.
One of the things that I do out here is I sow in clover, alfalfa. I spread lime down, make sure that the fowl get minerals and resources from the ground. There's a lot of upkeep on the pens. This facility, my little farm facility here, probably cost us in the neighborhood of about $50,000. The feed that I've come up with, it's a 16 to 17% protein feed. That took me years to get just the right proportions of it, so that the chickens can thrive off of it. So when it comes to the work on a game fowl farm, it's pretty much 365 days a year.
It is something that we can enjoy together, and our family, when they come, they get a kick out of us working as hard as we do. But when you see the beauty in some of these birds and the health and what they look like, it's worth it to us.
It's all worth it at the end of the day.
I understand from the trophies in your home that these are actually birds that get judged like Westminster dog shows.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that when Gina and I moved up to upstate New York, we started getting involved with poultry clubs where people come together. Sometimes we'd have them once, 2, 3 times a year. And people that are breeders like myself, it's just a way to go and meet with others that are like-minded, and we were having almost like family days, and people would show their chickens off. You show your work off at those shows, and then we would have American Poultry Association judges come in and judge them, and that's how you get the trophies and the ribbons, and sometimes you get little prizes and things like that. But most importantly, what Gina and I like with the shows is that you get to meet people, you make new friends, and when you're raising these old families of chickens, a lot of genetics and things go into the breeding programs. It's not a little thing to learn how to get a good eye on selection and being able to keep those families going with a consistency in color and conformation. So a lot goes into it.
He knows all the logistics of it. We would like to be with the families and some of the other ladies where we just enjoy them for what they are. And it really was a good time. It's a whole community of wonderful people that really put a lot into these type of birds.
Where does your oversight come from?
When we had bought this farm back in 2008, we had gotten involved with the NPIP, that's the National Poultry Improvement Plan. So every year an inspector comes out here from the New York State Department of Agriculture, and they make sure that the birds are being cared for. They do a polarum testing, and basically that's a way that the state's knowing that your birds are healthy and that there's no disease on the farm. Another way that you get oversight is I happen to be a member of the American Poultry Association, and we're able to speak with breeders from all over the country. There's tens of thousands of breeders across this country that are as devoted, and some even more devoted than Gina and I. Mm-hmm. But they have a lot of good input. You're always learning when you're perpetuating old families of birds. So I would call that an oversight as well.
So I can imagine this has been a hardship on you and your wife.
Yeah, that's saying it mildly. When we moved up here and just bought the farm, and bringing our old families of chickens up here, and for so many years just really enjoying raising the birds together. Gina and I do this stuff together. It's a joint effort, and to just have these birds that year after year you're raising, just taken with no charges. Originally there's no charges, and because of the allegations that are still out there, we can't get into anything legal talk, but the truth is it's been a very big hardship, not just on my wife and I, but all of our family members that are just beside themselves that we've had to go through this. So yeah, it's been a big hardship. Financially, it's been a serious issue as well. I really thank God for this game fowl community all across the country that has supported with finances, letters, phone calls, emails, you name it. It has really woken something up in a lot of the good people of this country that are just saying enough's enough. You know, unfortunately, there is so much advertising out there on cruelty, and really a one-sided view is what the public gets. And you know, those type of allegations towards good people it's a devastating has a devastating effect. So as a result of that, we have put we've had some friends put the Tommy Carano Legal Defense Fund together, which has helped to pay over half of our lawyer expenses, which are phenomenal, being that this is a federal case. The lawyer fees are they're staggering, and your average person would never be able to get through this without the help that we've received. So in addition to that, we've put out there that we are accepting contributions and people that want to help us to keep our farm, keep our home, and keep the bills paid as we go through this case. So if anybody's interested in whether you raise game chickens or not, if you'd like to help, the address and everything is going to be added on to this video.
We greatly appreciate all your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
How you doing? I'm a friend of Tommy Carano's, good friend of his, and just kind of disappointed on what's going on in Tommy's situation with the birds. I've helped him for quite a long time putting the fencing up and helped feeding the birds and taking care of them when he would go away and do stuff. We always cut the grass and made sure that the birds and the housing for them was always up to standards for the type of birds that they are, and there was never any type of misconception of anything on what the birds were actually being bred for, and there was always never a problem with the birds. We always took care of it, making sure that there was no diseases or any mishaps between the birds together. It's kind of a heartbreaking thing to see what him and his wife is going through. They built this nice farm and stuff as a family together, and the neighborhood enjoyed listening to the birds. What they would make that great noise in the morning time, and now it's dead quiet. And we like to have some sort of resolution for this, because it's not right for what he's going through, and I'm sure there's other people going to be pissed off and going through the same stuff. And I don't think that someone should be able to come into someone's home, property, farm, / anything that they're working very hard at, have a license for, and legal in New York State to do, and you come in and without giving any real answers or why. Look what's going on with the birds now. They look nothing like they were taken care of so well with Tommy and his wife, and now there's nothing here. So what is someone going to do about this?